this webinar on the aftermath of the Nigerian elections. Few house ground rules to start. We are on the record and recording. And you who are in the audience will have a chance to put questions to us if any arise via the chat. So I encourage you very much to make use of that, and we will pick from within the chat and put the questions to the panel when we get so far. With that, since we have a ton to get through, let me just jump right into it. I want to introduce our three panelists. We're really incredibly lucky to have both such a high caliber and also a wonderful kind of diverse mix of people joining from within Nigeria and from without. I'm going to introduce them in the order that they'll speak. We're going to start with Professor Abindon Ala. He is a professor of African Studies at the African Leadership Center at King's College London, amongst many other things. His CV is so long that it would take half of the webinar to go through it, but he's a very esteemed colleague. We then also have Ms. Idayat Hassan. She's the director of the Center for Democracy and Development, CDD. Yet, that is an Abuja-based policy, advocacy, and research organization focusing on deepening democracy and development in West Africa. She is also a lawyer and has had fellowships in universities across Europe and the United States. Last, but definitely not least, Professor Charles Ukeji. He is a prof of international relations at the Awolowo University in Nigeria. He's also the winner of the prestigious Mary Kingsley Zokonis Lecture Award at the Royal African Society, 2004. And the subsequent year was the Leventis Cooperation Visiting Research Scholar at the Center for African Studies, SOAS, in the UK. A very warm welcome to all three of you. If you would, let me do a quick scene setter, which is just going to be a rundown of the facts and figures in terms of where we are right now, and a couple of observations about notable firsts that this election witnessed, and then the challenges to the validity of the election. So an overview of the election results to start. We had a voter turnout of 27%, which people who know Nigeria better than me tell me is actually a relatively strong turnout. So that is an interesting fact. In terms of the results, the incumbent APC is retaining power. That means that the APC's candidate, Tinubu, won the election with 8.7 million votes. The PDP candidate, Atiku Abubakar, garnered 6.9 million votes, and the Labour Party candidate, led by Peter Obi, won 6.1 million votes, so coming in third place. Tinubu, the winner, won only 13 out of the 36 states of Nigeria, but he did finish second in almost every other state. You'll see there a map in front of you that illustrates some of this. Interestingly, also, Tinubu's state victories were concentrated in his native Southwest, with the exception of Lagos. That loss was surprising, as Tinubu has been described as the godfather of Lagosian politics. Atiku Abubakar won primarily in the north, and Obi won largely in Christian majority states in the south and in the north. Okay, on to notable firsts in this election, and there's two. Tinubu won with an all-Muslim ticket. So this is the first time since the return of democracy in 1999 that where Nigerian candidates have typically run a split ticket, meaning religiously split, one Muslim, one Christian. He decided to run on a Muslim ticket and won on that. The other first or unusual development was that Obi, the Labour candidate, unexpectedly won in Lagos and Abuja. Recall that was seen as the stronghold of Tinubu. Good. So now this election has not been, the election results have not been uncontested. We have both the Labour Party and the PDP rejecting the polls and having lodged legal complaints calling for a rerun of the election. If we look Africa continent-wide, there is some small precedent for this. In Kenya in 2017, we had elections rerun, as well as in Malawi in 2020. Some of the problems were cited by the online portal of the Independent National Electoral Commission, the INEC, and that was reported to have experienced delays in updating results from 177,000 polling stations. And that raised the specter that the election results may have been tampered with. Finally, this is the end of my short update. The EU Election Observation Mission pointed out, and I quote, the Naira cash and fuel scarcity reduced activities and attendance in the election. There was reports of vote buying that were frequent, and reports also of a lack of transparency and operational failures, which reduced trust in the process and challenged the right to vote. So with that as the scene setter, I want to turn to our first speaker, Abidon. We have sort of three clusters of questions that I want to get through. First, what's next immediately? Second set of questions, what does the election results tell us about changes in Nigeria's body politic? And then third, as we are the European Council on Foreign Relations, I am curious what these election results mean for foreign policy. Let's start though with the immediate what next question. We've seen notable international partners, let's call them leaders of other countries, have congratulated Tinubu on the victory. The outgoing now President Buhari has also recognized the result. So first question to you, Abidon, what are the prospects of the courts actually overturning the election results and calling for a rerun? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Theodore. Let me say that it's a great pleasure to be on your panel today. To give an immediate and quick response to your question, the answer is almost nil. The chances of court turning the election result up to say that it's no longer valid, it borders on the inexistence. I don't see it coming, and it is almost unlikely that such a thing will happen. So that's the straightforward answer to your question. Not necessarily because this case hasn't got merit, but also because to a very large extent, the grounds that many of these contestants are coming up to call for a cancellation of the result, the grounds are not likely to fly through the judicial processes in Nigeria. So straightforward answer to your question is, it is almost unlikely, but not the impossible.
Great, thanks very much. Let me turn next to you, Lydia. First, do you agree chances slim to none for judicial recourse? And then let me follow that up with another question. I'll give you a chance to expand upon your previous speaker's comments. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I think important is that, yes, this election has come and gone, but the laws in Nigeria are quite different compared to other climes. For us, the burden of proof, it's really about substantial compliance. It's not like Kenya, when you can actually think if there is actually minimum or any form of irregularities in these elections. And so far, so good. There seems to have been substantial compliance in court to the outcome of the elections in itself. And the new section 137 of the Electoral Act has even further made the burden of proof to be something much more different compared to previous elections, where you don't even have to call witnesses. You can actually rely on documents. Then what is the grouse of most of the actors? I think the challenge with this election has got to do with the upload of results on the INEC result viewing platform, which is supposed to actually add a modicum of credibility to the process. But again, it is INEC's failure to communicate, manage expectation, as well as their missteps in the improper management of IREV. The process of collation remains manual, which is you have to take the physical copy of the result from the polling unit to the ward level, from the ward level to the local government, state level, and finally, after collation at the state level, to the National Collation Center here in Abuja. That is the process as written in the law. But in subsidiary regulations, such as the INEC guidelines for the conduct of the elections, they added the IREV as a form of photo quick count, and they marketed it to Nigerians as an El Dorado that will actually save us, that will add integrity to the whole process of elections. And they did not deliver on it, and Nigerians are indeed extremely angry. They felt let down that they could not actually view this result in real time. So that will now be dependent on what the court will actually be looking at. Will they be looking at what the laws really have and what actually trumps the order? Will it be the electoral, the constitution, or will it be the INEC guidelines itself, where they have made provision for this, for the IREV, that will be the determinant for the elections? But INEC failed in terms of communication they gave, and they also failed in terms of the promises they've actually given to Nigeria. And this has blighted the outcome of the elections. And I think, just to go a bit further, 2 minutes, is that the elections is not really about the outcome itself, is the processes that have led to it. When you think in terms of the outcome, these elections is almost like defeated hegemonic politics in Nigeria. When you look at the numbers of votes and how it has played out, with APC barely scaling up with less than 2 million votes. In the National Assembly, for the first time in the history of the country's polity, since the return to democracy in 1999, we currently have 11 parties who have won seats out of the 18 political parties in the National Assembly, 7 strong representation in the Senate, and 11 when it comes to the state houses, House of Representative seats. And this is just like looking at over 80, just 80 plus of results that have so far been declared in the elections. Thank you. Over.
Thanks so much, Adia. Let me ask you one follow-up, and then I'll come to Charles, because I thought it was really interesting that you put your finger on the fact that the IREV is not really the decisive way to track the validity of the election results. Could you put it in layman's terms? What do you think is the thing that we all should be looking at if we're trying to ascertain the degree of fairness and validity of these results?
I think, like for us at the CDD, we framed it in 4 ways. And we framed one, the electoral operation itself, the electoral mismanagement, which actually blighted these elections, the violence and voter intimidation as a very, very important component itself, because when you talk in terms of the turnout, we did not expect to have 35% turnout, or maxing the 35% turnout we had in 2019 would have been a positive, considering the insecurity that has ravaged the country, the fear of violence. But the 27% turnout is like an anomaly, minus 8% itself. But this was also driven by the violence, the voter suppression and intimidation that was encountered in different parts of Nigeria, not just in Lagos, as the narrative is currently ongoing. In fact, tracking violence this morning, I think we've seen up to 15 states where this has actually emanated from. Then the information ecosystem itself also is very important, because information pollution, the disorder, in a way impacted these elections. And finally, will be the voting behavior of the people. This election was largely driven by identity, where people either voted based on ethnic lenses, with some candidates holding their strong forts. And for the first time, we saw many states flip. For instance, Yobe State since 1999 has never gone to PDP. They've never voted PDP since 1979. Historically, it has been a GNPP, APP, up to the APC level. Now it flipped to PDP because of ethnicity. Not because of ethnicity, the same way the Southeast, the same way 5 out of the APC 6 states in the Northwest, 4 going to, some of it going, majority of it going to PDP, 1 going to Kwakwanso really in these elections, in spite of it being APC state. So people voted on that, and we saw people vote on religion. Nasarawa Plateau, for instance, voted en masse for the Obi ticket beyond a Southeast support. So these four factors have gone a long way in defining the elections, while of course the mismanagement of the elections itself have blighted any form of gain or defeat of hegemonic politics that we could have, be counting as a success from this electoral cycle.
Judea, thank you very much. Compelling. Charles, I'll come to you. I want to ask, beyond calling the election results into question, what other reactions might be expected. But let me just also put to you something that emerged from Mariette's comments. It seems easy, if you're trying to follow this in a technocratic way, to tally something like the IREV, and we can see that the results were delayed in 177,000 polling. But if we're looking at the way that voter intimidation can affect polling and voter turnout, it seems much more difficult to quantify. Do you think that because we're forced to look for very quantifiable data, we're missing the big picture in terms of possible electoral interference? That question, then let's ask about what else we might expect. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I am not as optimistic as Professor Alao, and I'm certainly not as may not be as detailed as Hidayat. But I want to say that the grounds of INEC's failure, it's not just about communication. Okay, the grounds of INEC's failure is not just about failure to communicate. Anyone that loves Nigeria and cares about Nigeria must acknowledge the fact that INEC failed woefully. This is the worst elections we've ever had. I mean, and I agree with you that, you know, the logistic challenges, all the issues are substantial.
But Charles, just to break in, you said it's the worst elections we've ever had. For people watching this, yes, explain what makes it the worst? Turnout, violence, other things. Quantify that.
Basically, it's about the mismanagement of it by the electoral body. The electoral body broke its own rules in terms of the electoral law. It broke the rules in terms of the guidelines that it provided for itself. And so it's not just about communication, about its inability to communicate. It's much more than that in my view. And I'm not surprised at all that all the three major parties other than the ruling party have all gone to court. Okay, they've all gone to court. And so for me, when Professor Alao said that, you know, nothing is going to come out of it, I think this is more like putting the cart before the horse. I think that much will depend on what happens to the judiciary, what the judiciary will do. Do Nigerians trust the judiciary? Absolutely no. Although thankfully this morning, the Supreme Court has decided that, ruled that the old Naira note should come back until December 2023, which is going to bring a lot of relief for Nigerians. But do we trust the judiciary? The answer is absolutely no. And when it goes to the judiciary, now that the matter has gone to court, the parties, the aggrieved parties are asking that they want to examine documents, they want to examine ballot papers, they want to see electoral sheets and so on and so forth. So for me, it's going to be a long night. Yes, a winner has been declared, but I don't think that it's any yet Uhuru. This is what I would say. Regarding the question that you asked, this election is very different in many respects. A lot of myths about Nigerian elections have been shattered. It is not just about, for instance, everybody talks about you need a structure to win election. We now know that the structure is not necessarily the structure that is physical, but that the structure is around people. We have seen that young people have, suddenly come to, become like Paul on the road to Damascus. They have realized that they have electoral value, and they are they've come out to express their thoughts. The landscape has changed. The map of Nigeria, has changed significantly. And I think this was the point that Idayat was raising. So I don't think that even though some people talk about Nigerian elections as watershed elections, I think that this one is much more than it. And I don't think that it should be waved with a finger, with a hand, that is not important. It is absolutely important. And I don't think that, I think we should wait to hear what the court say. And I think that for the first time, the court has, where everybody is looking to the court to beyond technicalities, to actually pronounce itself on the process that has led to the point that we're in now.
Well, let's drill down on that for a second, because I heard you saying in the beginning of your intervention that Nigerians absolutely don't trust the court, that it's politicized, but now you're also saying we have to wait to see what the court produces. So help us understand that better. What does the court need to produce, or what does it need to follow in terms of process to be convincing?
Yes, can I just quickly comment on that? I find it quite interesting that Professor Okeja has taken up on some of the things that I said. And I must say this, the first point that you raised, that this is the worst election in the history of Nigeria, I think we must actually approach such a statement with some caution. Definitely, without any shadow of doubt, there have been many rough edges with this election. Whether this is the worst in the history of the country is a matter of opinion, which is neither here nor there. But as I said, I will concede without any shadow of doubt that there are quite a lot of rough edges in this last election. As regards the trust in the judiciary, I find it very interesting that we are always very selective in our trust in the judiciary. When things go according to what we expect, we praise the judiciary. When things don't go in line with our expectation, we blame the judiciary. There's kind of a selective trust that I think it's really very crucial now. For example, people have started praising the judiciary because of the judgment few hours ago about the currency swap or things like that. So I think this is something we have to take into consideration. But finally, I need to say this. I am not saying that the judiciary will necessarily just endorse this, but I'm just saying is that going by what I can see, I don't think, and I'm not putting it higher than thinking, I don't think the judiciary will come up and say that this election is null and void and that Nigerians should go and vote again. I honestly don't think so.
Great. Okay, thanks. It's good. We don't want anyone's views to be mischaracterized. Charles, come back to you, because the original question I had, not the response to other speakers, was what other reactions might be expected. You pointed to the fact that this election was unusual in the degree it mobilized the youth. So I don't want to make this a leading question, but that could be one place one might look to see other forms of reaction. So one would hope that everyone waits out the legal process and abides by it. But as you said, not everybody has full confidence in that process, and so might be encouraged to take matters into their own hands. As speculation on my part, what do you see right now as possible reactions from the population in the first place, and then perhaps also by the political elites?
Well, thank you very much. One reaction is what we've already seen in the last 2 days. They've all gone to court. The parties that lost have gone to court, and it's going to be a very long one. The second reaction is that, what Nigerians call sit down look. A lot of people are just watching what is going to happen. The key political actors are actually calling out their constituencies to say, look, let's maintain peace. Let's maintain peace. Let's be law abiding. Let's go through the processes, in a civil manner, and so on and so forth. So this is what we're saying. but we're also seeing in pockets of different places across the country, especially in Southwest Nigeria and in the Southeast Nigeria, the resurgence of new, ethnicities and, ethnic slurs being traded across the board, between different groups, including in places like Lagos and so on and so forth. We have seen that from this election that no party can actually say that it holds sway in any particular region or in any particular state out of the 36 states and the federal capital. As you said earlier when you started, I mean, nobody would have thought that APC would have such casualty in Lagos, and nobody would have thought that PDP would not win Kano, or nobody would have thought that Labour Party would win Abuja. So things are changing, and for me, I think that this is very, very important. And I also think, and I want to come back to the point about the youth factor, because 93 million voters, those between ages 18 and 35 are almost about 40 million. And in the few months towards the election, with extensive sensitization, a large number of people actually collected their PVCs. People are beginning to see that, and these are young people, these are professionals, these are very urban people, and these are people that are beginning to recognize that they've been awakened, if you like, in their consciousness about the role that they can play. So moving forward, I see that with this election has, in a way, or at a level, unleashed a tiger in youth. And I suspect that this is not going to go to sleep in a long time.
Thanks so much, Charles. Iliad, let me turn to you. Charles says it's unleashed a tiger in the youth. I mean, that's fascinating, and a lot of the imagination of the youth vote seems to have been captured by Obi. What does it mean now going forward? These mobilized youth were mobilized, I would imagine, by the prospect of victory, and now they've come in third place insofar as they largely belong to Obi's camp. What do you see as the future of these obedients, I think, as they've been colloquially named, and what would you see as the next move for Obi himself?
Oh, thank you very much. I think that I need to reframe some issues. In the first instance, we were talking about IREF and a general mismanagement of the elections. And the mismanagement of the elections, rightly put, it goes beyond the communication issues. It goes to talk really about the late arrivals of voting materials in several polling units across the country. In some certain instances, there were also beavers malfunctioning that was also experienced during voting. Yes, we do agree, at least with CDD reports, that in most cases, this was actually addressed within 30 minutes, like in more than 60% instances, 30 minutes, and in other instances, we had where it was not also addressed, and it varies, arrival varied according to geopolitical divide, with the Southeast being the most impacted for reasons of insecurity and any other reasons that could actually be advanced in terms of this. So this electoral mismanagement, I think, is the crux of the matter, with IREF being a big issue. This is what is blighting the outcome, and this is what is making Nigerians extremely angry and characterize the outcome in whatever languages that they do love to use. When it comes to the youth, I think I beg to differ that young people in these elections, constituting over 39% on the list of registered voters, were never at any point a monolith. While some were obedient, others were supporting Kwekwanso, batified, that is Tinubu, and of course articulated. And with some even saying they are Showore revolution now. We have a lot of them even here where I work. So they were never a monolith. They were a diverse, heterogeneous group supporting different candidates. But what has happened with the declaration of results is there is a gloomy scenario and there is actually a positive one. On the gloomy side, trust in democracy, of course, have considerably dissipated in the hearts of people. and particularly elections as a means of selecting leaders, because of course, the election management body, what is it? They oversold, like I keep going around saying this, and they under-delivered. They presented what they could not, they did not deliver at any point. This has dampened trust in the whole process itself. And what we expect is that many of these young people could actually decide to emigrate along the Japa syndrome we've been talking about, with many Nigerians emigrating to other parts of the world, or the demand for democracy will decline. But on the positive side, we also agree that politics can never be the same again in Nigeria, nor will democracy. If you're having a tablecloth of political parties, 11 in the National Assembly, just for these first sets of elections, and citizens seeing the way the vote has gone, that they do have power. It was at first, votes do have consequences. Now they also understand that votes do have power. We do expect them to give the next administration a run for their money. So on the positive side, they will continue to hold elected officials accountable. That is, if the gloomy side does not outweigh the positive side. And when it comes to the judiciary, actually, it's neither here nor there. Nigerians currently do not have trust in the judiciary. Either you go by the Afrobarometer, or even in our elections, with the last Afrobarometer report that was released a few weeks into the elections. In fact, when you ask Nigerians, everybody believed that things are going, over 80%, things are actually going in the wrong direction. That was their response.
Let me pick up on one point you made there, because I think it's really interesting, and it ties back to the first question. So if I understood you well, you seem to be saying that actually this is a net positive, because the newly mobilized voters have seen that the electoral process and their vote has power and influence. So it can invest them more in the democratic process, which also means by default, it would discourage people from seeking other means of affecting politics, right? Armed protest, whatever. That seems very good. But then it seems, in order for that to hold up, the judicial process, which some of you are saying doesn't matter, seems to me it does matter, because the judicial process is the one that's going to kind of verify or prove to everybody that their vote was in fact counted. Can you say a word about that, Hidayat, just to follow up, and I'll ask the same question to the two other speakers.
I think that here now, everybody, this is an elections run on the basis of identity, either generational identity, ethnic identity, or religious identity. I am a lawyer by training. I personally do believe that there is a difference between reality, perception, and reality and expectation. I don't even want to talk about perception here. There is nothing that the judiciary may do, irrespective of their culpability in the first instance, the fact that we do not believe them, that may be acceptable to all parts of Nigeria, because it depends on who. If it's by identity, if perchance the law is actually interpreted and Tinubu is said to have actually won this based on the body of law that we've had as a country, on the other parts of the country are not necessarily going to accept that. And in the same way, if the hopes of people are dashed that Obi is not reinstated as the winner of the elections, it will be the same. In fact, if you go to the table and you start thinking in terms of spread, you look at spread. Tinubu had 29 states. I see they are even calling it 30 states now. Obi has got 16 states in terms of the 25% spread. And Atiku Abubakar has got 21 states, which are all constitutional provision. In fact, there are still contention on if it is and or Abuja, the federal capital territory. And if it really means that Tinubu, without winning the 25% in Abuja, has won or not. That is in spite of locus classicus that has settled this matter since the 2003 elections. So everybody has gone into their enclaves and identity is holding forth in such a way that it might actually be extremely difficult to see that justice has been done, whatever the outcome of the court really is.
Thanks, Lydia. Well, this question of identity, that feeds into two other questions that I had. I'll come to you, Professor Lau, and then you, Charles. Two things that struck me as unique is moving away from the traditional Muslim-Christian split ticket to a Muslim-Muslim ticket by Tinubu. Is that important? What's the impact? And then the second notable development or I won't call it an anomaly, but unexpected electoral blip was Obi winning Lagos, where Tinubu was supposedly the godfather of politics there. Can you say a little bit about that? Professor Lau, you first, and then Charles.
Yes, thank you very much. The first one on the Muslim ticket. Yes, it has played out well in this, in quote, in this case, but I don't know the extent to which it will continue to be a factor in future Nigerian politics. The exigencies that made this necessary for Tinubu in this context may be understandable in some cases, but the extent to which this will continue to be a factor is something that will wait to be seen. I think because it has worked out in this particular case, I'm not very sure whether in the next election, maybe say in the next 10, 15 years, it will continue to be an issue that people will overlook. As Hidayat has pointed out, religion has come out as a very important factor in this case, and the future again is something that is likely to be a major issue in the years ahead. So the Muslim ticket, it has worked out in this case, but I'm not sure the extent to which it will continue to work out in subsequent elections. I think it's something that we have to wait to see, because it depends on the prevailing circumstances at the time of a specific election. That is that. On the Lagos one, yes, I think it's a major thing and this again speaks to the ethnic factor in this situation. Many people believe very strongly that Lagos has gone Obi way because of the large percentage of Igbo population in Lagos. And this again underlines the future of possible ethnic tension. Because like now people are now saying that, well, fine, in the perception of most Nigerians, the Igbos are still visitors, quote unquote, in Lagos, and that if care is not taken, they may hijack the state and possibly produce a governor, possibly produce other things. So this underlines the possibility of future ethnic tension in some parts of the country, especially in Lagos. Already, the APC is now gearing up to ensure that the Labour Party or any other party does not take the governorship. And I can confirm that from what I've been able to see and read, there has been massive agitations to ensure that this does not happen. So my concern really is that I'm not sure of the extent to which this will not create minor ethnic tension or even major ones, ethnic tension between the Igbos and the Yorubas in Lagos. I think it's something that wait to be seen. But yes, Obi has established a very major point in saying that, well, the effective grip of a force like Tinubu can be shaken in Lagos, and that has been effectively done. Whether this will be the case in the governorship, wait to be seen. And as I said, the APC is trying to ensure that the governorship does not slip away from its hand.
Okay, just before I go to Charles, one follow-up. It's fascinating to me. How did Obi do it? What was his recipe for success in Lagos? What can we learn from that?
Well, a number of factors, in my own opinion, accounted for this, but three are particularly important. The first is the ethnic dimension. There are quite a significant population of Igbo people in Lagos. That's one. The second is are the consequences of the EndSARS revolt. There are individuals in Lagos who believe very strongly, rightly or wrongly, that Tinubu has been indicted and implicated in the EndSARS revolt. So it was a case of a protest vote as a result of the EndSARS. The third is the religious factor. There are many Pentecostal churches, and I know for sure that many Pentecostal pastors actually went to the church to specifically insist that their members should vote for Obi. And so when you consider the ethnic factor, when you consider the consequences of the NSAS factor, and when you look at the religious factor and also the generational factor, I think all these came together to account for the Obi's success in Lagos.
Thanks very much. That's very helpful. Charles, over to you. The same question. Too soon to tell if the move to Muslim ticket is something that we're going to see more of, and anything else you can venture on Obi's win in Lagos and what it portends.
Yeah, I mean, if you can have a Muslim ticket, what stops you from having a Christian ticket? So this has basically set a precedent that nobody can now say tomorrow, if there is another Muslim ticket or there is a Christian ticket, that it will not fly. So this is, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I like the thought of precedence, okay? But the truth is that even Tinubu himself, Bola Ahmed Tinubu himself, in 2005 and in 2019, recognized the importance of having a ticket, a Christian Muslim or Muslim Christian ticket. And that was why we still today have the Vice President, Yemi Osinbajo, who is a Redeemed Church member, you know, as part of government. So, and like Professor Lau said, obviously, you know, for this particular election, it was a question of exigencies, for political exigencies for him. But it has set a precedence that we can tomorrow have another Muslim ticket or have another Christian ticket. What are the implications of that in the attempt to build inclusivity? You know, it's a question that we have to contend with, unfortunately. You know, when this whole thing started, of course, you know, everybody knows that Lagos is the epicenter of political, economic, social, you know, issues in Nigeria. Lagos itself is a melting pot. I am not sure that that the figures that, you know, are going around about the percentage of Igbos in Lagos is not over the board. But I believe the point that was raised about the impact of the NSAS, and bear in mind, NSAS was not entirely just a youth thing. A lot of professionals invested in NSAS. This whole youth thing started with this thing about 4 people tweeting in a room, okay? And today, we have seen how it has suddenly grown. And in fact, the truth is that, I mean, for me, I think that young people have become, if you like, the swing state in Nigeria's elections. And we cannot ignore that. So moving forward, in the next couple of days, we're going to have elections in Lagos. Already ethnic issues are playing out. The candidate of the governorship candidate for for Labour Party, nobody can be more Lagosian than him. Okay, but suddenly people are realizing that his mother is Igbo. People are coming up with Tinubu's daughter-in-law being non-Yoruba. So this is opening a kind of Pandora's box. And unfortunately, nobody can tell where this is going to end. But I don't think that the swing in Lagos could be entirely credited to the Igbos. I believe that the swing in Lagos happened because, you know, in spite of the Igbos, I believe that there's a critical mass of Nigerians that live in Lagos who are frustrated for several different reasons. They are frustrated from the outcomes of NSAS. They are frustrated about, you know, the political, economic situations that they face, you know, which the rest of us across Nigeria face anyway. And what we are seeing with the victory, with the vote that went to the Labour Party, is precisely a protest against what the APC has become in the last 8 years.
Great, thanks so much. Charles, let me push you on one point that you flagged up, which was really interesting. The Muslim ticket and its relationship to inclusion in a national context. Would you forecast, would you predict that this is going to be a hindrance to political inclusion and cohesion for the country, the adoption of a Muslim ticket?
I think that Nigerians have a way of pulling back from the brinks. And I think this is perhaps one of the most, one of the things that distinguish the Nigerian, the average Nigerian. We have a way of pulling back from the brinks. And that is why those days that people thought Nigeria will implode end up becoming the most peaceful day. So for me, it's an issue now. And I think it's an issue because it's politicized. Okay, the same way ethnicity and religion, is politicized. That for me is what is happening. I really would like a situation where this is taken not as a precedent, but it has been set as a precedent and we cannot ignore it. So tomorrow we can have another Muslim ticket. The next time we can have a Christian ticket. And I think there will always be that bold question mark on inclusivity, and we cannot ignore that.
So in Nigeria, where we don't see religion, if I can paraphrase.
Actually, football is the only thing. Obviously, this election has shown that football is the only thing that we all have in common. This election has shown that the framing of unity, is really very, very shallow in Nigeria. Sadly.
Yes, maybe I should just quickly add something very briefly.
Jump in.
I think the point is, I know how significant religion is in Nigeria, but I'm much more interested in having a credible ticket instead of having a Muslim ticket or a Christian ticket. It should just be credible ticket, just two people that are credible. And again, with what Professor Okeji has said, Nigeria has a way of pulling back from the brink. I always say that Nigeria is a country where the best may be impossible, but the worst will not happen.
Thanks, Professor. Yeah, those are inspiring words. We're moving on to our third and final band of questions about foreign policy. I just want to remind people who are watching that if they have questions, your chance to pose them is quickly expiring. All you need to do is type them into the chat and they will be relayed to me. So on to foreign policy. We are the European Council on Foreign Relations, so this is our bread and butter. Look, a simple kind of opening question here. I'll come to you, Idayat, first, if that's okay. Where do you see the key points of difference in Tinubu's view on foreign policy as compared to his now predecessor, Buhari? Do you think we're looking at continuity, or are we going to see any break from the policies of the past? Over to you. You're muted.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. I think that the Tinubu administration will go a long way in terms of being aggressive on our foreign policy compared to the Buhari's administration. This is expected. I think all throughout the campaign, on the campaign trail, he kept emphasizing that beyond their campaign documents. In fact, he kept emphasizing not just in terms of relationship, but in terms of competition, even going on to talk about he wants to compete with Russia when it comes to the sale of gas. And assuming they have, it's also expected, like we are all projecting, that they will likely hit the ground running because of the challenges that has occasioned, that has blighted this win, the legitimacy of the win, the Muslim ticket, for instance, which means that they will have to be extremely inclusive of ethnicity, religion, and social class. We are also expecting that really that they would possibly have a stellar cabinet. In fact, all through the campaign, there was an agreement amongst Nigerians that all the three frontline candidates either will be Tinubu, Atiku, they can never be like the Buhari administration. So if we want to be optimistic, maybe cautiously optimistic, we expect that they would actually be doing that. And you will see that they are also trying as much as possible with the stories we are seeing them put up in the newspaper, left, right, and center, showing how their win is being celebrated internationally. They would put some focus on foreign policy itself. Really.
Before I move on to the other two, you caught my imagination with this phrase, Idayat, of aggressive foreign policy. Can you say a little bit more? What does an aggressive foreign policy look like?
Well, I think there is something we call sit-down look in Nigeria. And when you look at Nigeria in the last 8 years, the 8 years of the Buhari administration, we could not even hold our own when it comes to West Africa, ECOWAS, We could not even define that what would be the Nigeria's policy as it relates to ECOWAS. That is just at the micro level, without us talking about Nigeria with the African Union or Nigeria's engagement with the international community. Yes, it was a positive when you look in terms of maybe foreign direct investment and some kind of policies. It was more in terms of business oriented. It wasn't political, nor the leadership, nor was the leadership seen from a political prism itself. We were a bit weak. We were looking for more of what we could get, business, weaponry, without defining what our relationship will be, or leading the definition of relationship from just West Africa, which is our forte, and Africa, either as the center of our foreign policy itself. And I do not personally expect that will hold sway in this with the new coming administration, or else we could just have to forget that Nigeria is the giant of Africa, or the importance Nigeria is owed to the world. Really.
Yeah, the still sleeping giant. Thanks, Adea. I'll come to you, Charles, and Professor Lau. I want to throw in one other question that's coming in from the chat. If you can, in addition to talking about foreign policy continuity or change, say something about how are Nigerians perceiving the international statements now coming after the elections? Are these positive, helpful? Are they seen to be undermining, politicized? What can you say about that? Over to you.
Prof, you want to start?
Well, yes, I don't mind starting. Let me first make a comment about what Hidayat said about we're a bit weak. I think that is just being mild. It's not a bit. We are really, the foreign policy activities of the Buhari administration has been significantly weak, not a bit weak, significantly very weak, especially when you consider it against the antecedents of Obasanjo or even Jonathan. I think the last 8 years did not actually witness any significant impact along that line. So Tinubu will have to do a lot of work on this, and I expect that he will do this, especially against the background of the fact that he personally has relationship with individuals, especially across West African coast, and because he has been likely very cosmopolitan in his outlook, I see foreign policy activities of the Tinubu administration to be extremely robust, especially when compared with the Buhari administration. I can't remember what the second question was.
So can I start then? Can I start?
Okay, go ahead, Charles. Yeah, we're getting close to time as well, so I'm going to start having to be a little bit more interventionist. Go ahead, Charles.
Okay, you see, during the period of campaigning, one of the things that Bola Ahmed Tinubu kept repeating was that he was going to continue the legacy, and I'm quoting him, the legacy of President Buhari. Whether that was just political sophistry is a different question entirely, but that was what he kept saying. So my sense is that we're going to find ourselves possibly with a situation in which the more things change, the more they remain the same. Nigeria's foreign policy has, in recent times, in the last 10 years, been mostly reactive. Nothing is proactive about Nigeria's foreign policy. The only thing I would concede to Tinubu, perhaps, is that he comes from a completely different, orientation from Buhari. And because he's a very cosmopolitan personality, that might rub off on not just foreign policy, but also on domestic policy. But for as long if he says that he will continue the policies of legacies of the Buhari General Buhari's administration, then that will be most unfortunate. That will be a major disaster for Nigeria. I think that as a business person, he will have a completely different orientation because, Buhari is a military man, he's going to have a different orientation. It's going to be easier for him to build bridges across different divides, internationally and so on and so forth. But I don't think that Nigeria's foreign policy is going to change fundamentally. Look, the manifestos of the three leading parties, there is nothing, very strong that can give anybody any excitement. And I've looked at them. I've looked at the manifestos, and if it is true that people don't really, once people get to power, they abandon their manifestos. This is what happens. But if we go by manifestos and we're talking about Nigeria's foreign policy, I think it's just going to be essentially the same. But the bottom line is, of course, that anybody that finally starts from May 29, we have a whole lot of domestic issues to contend with, that foreign policy becomes just very secondary, more about travels, meeting other people, and all of that. But I don't see anything that will fundamentally change.
Okay, great. As we're coming close at the time, let me just do a follow-up for you, Charles, and other people can jump in, but very briefly. Again, still on foreign policy. Charles, you'd advanced before this metaphor of Nigeria and foreign policy as a beautiful bride, meaning entertaining suitors from all sides and not committing to any of them. And now you've also said how there's not a strong discernible change in the foreign policy posture from what you can see in the manifestos. So would you stick by that metaphor? Should we be not expecting, or do we not see any inherent tilt towards one or the other camp, let's say, in this multipolar world?
No. I think that Nigeria is going to, Nigeria has always professed non-alignment. Whether we understand what non-aligned means is a different question entirely. I think that Nigeria is going to continue to warm up to the East and the West. Whether that unruffles feathers in Western capitals or in Eastern capitals, a different point entirely. But I think that Nigeria will continue to, will not want to upset the cart. Okay, so we're going to relate with Europe. We're going to relate with Europe to the East, Europe to the West, North America, essentially the same way, more reactive. I don't see anything fundamentally changing. Perhaps the question you would like to, that could perhaps come up is, what are the opportunities for EU and for EU member states? And I see two, or perhaps three. The first one is just to allow things happening in Nigeria to continue the way they are. Okay, let Nigerians resolve their problems. But bear in mind that for a country that is over 200 million people, whatever happens to Nigeria will have a big impact, on the whole of West Africa and the whole of Africa. Okay, so that's clear already. I mean, you can see the number of Nigerians that have, that have jackpot to Britain, and the British are beginning to worry about this. The other one is to say, let's continue business as usual. Let's continue to manage Nigeria. The third one would be to say, look, how can we engage better, in a much more robust, in a much more sustained manner? For me, this third option will be very helpful. Whether the empire of problems within, internally, would allow a new government to see those is a different question entirely. But I think that a continuous and sustained engagement, with key partners in Europe, both East and the West, and North America will be very useful, helpful.
Okay, great, thanks. So no secrets to unlocking Nigeria's foreign policy, awakening the sleeping giant for the best.
Not at all.
Looking at you, we're at time, Hidayat and Professor Alao. Do you have burning last words? Otherwise, we are in Germany. I'd like to be punctual.
Oh, well, yes, just a very quick one. I don't want us to take very seriously Tinubu's statement that we would continue with the legacies of Buhari. I don't really want us to take it very seriously. I think it's just a political statement meant to satisfy the tide of the moment then. I still see a situation where Tinubu will pursue a very aggressive foreign policy, because such a policy would be very helpful to its domestic activities. That's just what I mean.
But if we understand that there's not continuity, there's change, and you and Hidayat use this word aggressive. Can you substantiate that for us a little bit? Because people are listening now when you say there's an aggressive foreign policy. What does that translate into?
Oh, well, it means a foreign policy that is very engaging. Instead of
Okay.
this, aggressive against the background of antecedents.
Okay, versus lethargic.
Yes.
Say energetic, maybe.
It will just be one that will be very engaging, that will be more responsive instead of just one being kind of just
Proactive. Okay.
Proactive than that's
Gotcha.
exactly what I mean.
Okay, thanks, Professor. Idiot, last words?
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think Tinubu played these elections being extremely strategic and political. So I also do not expect him to actually build on any Buhari's legacy, because speaking in his native language at every opportunity he had, he was able to mobilize ethnically and also to show that there is actually a difference between the Buhari administration and his own administration, while also being friendly or pushing blame on people surrounding the president. When it comes to the foreign policy itself, what we should note is that they are not going to, this administration, I do not see them sticking to either the West or the East. It will still be that posture of the previous non-alignment itself, which will mean that they will try as much as possible to benefit from all parties, but aggressively this time around, and maybe much more coordinated than what we have actually witnessed in the last 8 years. And when it comes to the identity-based voting, we saw it with Tinubu, with Obi winning more than 90%. There was a question in the chat, winning 90%, average 80% in the southeast of the country, and which is actually his ethnic stronghold. We saw how several states flipped in the Northwest, the Northeast, to Atiku Abubakar because he was Fulani based on the Namu. And we also saw 4 of the Southwest states give the most votes to Tinubu, who is a fellow Yoruba. And by this Southwest state, we are talking of states which are almost homogeneous, not capital cities like Lagos, which is actually a potpourri of everybody that is actually a Nigerian. So this has come out and it has played a very strong role, but it's not just ethnicity, religion, and generation has gone to play a long way. And I think on the final note, what we saw in the presidential elections may not necessarily replicate itself when we get to the subnational elections on March 11th, because at that level, politics is local and it is extremely local. And the locals, we really want to have their ways and their votes count and their voice heard this time around. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Idiot. With that, we're going to have to wrap it up. We're 4 minutes over time. I would love to get together again with this eminent group of speakers and review if we really have seen the end of the lethargic Nigerian foreign policy and moved into a proactive one. Charles, let's keep it for next time. We are over time right now. I see that there's a number of questions in the chat we didn't get to as well. We'll note them and let's use that as encouragement to meet again. So with that, a huge thanks to all of the panelists, Charles, Professor Lau, Hidayet, from us at the ECFR Africa program, and see you again soon.